Hello, my name is Jürgen Schwarze. I'm a pediatrician at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm currently the Secretary General of the European Academy of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. Today on World Children's Day, I'd like to speak to you about Preschool Wheeze. What is Preschool Wheeze? Preschool Wheeze affects children between the ages of 1 to 6 years, and they develop episodes of a whistling sound from the chest when they're breathing, especially when they're breathing out. And this often goes along with significant breathlessness. These symptoms are due to a narrowing of their breathing tubes of the lung. So why is preschool wheeze important? Preschool wheeze is very common. We think that by the age of 3 years, about 30% of children, by the age of 6 years, almost 50% of children will have had at least one episode of wheeze. And this is based on data from the USA. In Europe, parents report wheezing for up to 17% of preschool children. And this seems to vary between countries, with the highest rates in Iceland and in the United Kingdom. Importantly, acute episodes of preschool wheeze can lead to severe breathlessness that requires hospital admission. Furthermore, severe preschool wheeze presents a major burden for affected families. It can reduce their quality of life, and with frequent episodes of wheezing, there may be a significant loss of time at work, and these families will incur additional costs. Furthermore, significant preschool wheeze is a significant burden on healthcare systems. It is the most frequent reason for hospital admission in childhood, and also often leads to A&E attendance and to GP visits. So what are the risk factors and the triggers of preschool wheeze? Importantly, infections, lung infections, both with viruses and bacteria, but also exposure to air pollution and to cigarette smoke. These are all very important risk factors and triggers. For some children, allergen exposure, for example, to house dust mite or pets, may induce episodes of preschool wheeze. And what happens to these children in the longer run? Luckily, about half of the children with preschool wheeze have no long-term consequences. The preschool wheeze will resolve itself. However, in the children where it doesn't resolve itself, there is a very high risk of development of childhood asthma, which usually continues into adulthood. In addition, children with severe preschool wheeze that goes along with severe lung infections have a risk of reduced lung development, which leads to a lower capacity and function of the lung as an adult. And that in turn has a risk of insufficient lung function in later life. This is illustrated in this graph, where the black curve shows the normal development of lung function throughout age, starting in early childhood, with a maximum reached in the early mid-20s, and then the lung function slowly goes down with age. In children with severe preschool wheeze, and this is the purple curve here, the maximum of lung function reached is significantly lower than in normal development. And then this is followed again by a decline in lung function, and these people may, in much earlier life, for example, in their 50s, reach a threshold where they run into clinical problems, into problems of chronic obstructive airway disease, or COPD. So what are the challenges with preschool wheeze? I think we need to try and understand how to prevent the development of preschool wheeze, in particular, prevent episodes of severe preschool wheeze. And we also need to find ways to prevent subsequent development of asthma, and importantly, to prevent impaired lung development. So people have used asthma preventer treatments for children with preschool wheeze, for example, inhaled corticosteroids. And they reduced the frequency of acute episodes of preschool wheeze by about 30%, but this is unfortunately only effective in a minority of affected children. One could think about social and societal interventions to avoid and reduce the triggers of preschool wheeze. For example, to improve air quality, reduce air pollution, avoid cigarette smoke exposure, and through social distancing means one could try to reduce respiratory viral infections. But importantly, we really need to better understand the disease mechanisms behind preschool wheeze. And this needs to be done through research. There's currently very exciting research ongoing into mechanisms of preschool wheeze. And this research tries to understand the role of the epithelial cells. These are the lining cells of the breathing tubes of the lung, and also the role of the muscle cells that sit around these breathing tubes. Another important question is, what is the role of the immune system, both locally in the lungs and systemically throughout the body? And a fairly new aspect that has become of major interest is to try and understand the influence of the microbiome. This is the bugs that colonize our lungs without usually without causing disease. So to understand their role on the development of preschool wheeze or the protection from preschool wheeze. So the most promising way to try and study this are prospective cohorts of children who are recruited when they're very young and followed up over several years. And some of them will develop preschool wheeze and others won't. And one can compare these two groups. And one such longitudinal study that's currently ongoing in the United Kingdom is the Breathing Together study. And in such studies, one can then ask, are there differences in the genes between children with and without preschool wheeze? Differences in how genes are accessed and whether they're actually being used to make protein. You can then look at differences in proteins and the amount of proteins that are being produced. And you can obviously nowadays analyze the microbiome in great detail. So basically find out which bacteria, viruses, and fungi live in our airways and our lung. And interesting or importantly, you can do all of these things using single cell techniques. So this allows you to say which cells actually have changes in their gene expression and in their behavior. So the hope is that this knowledge will allow us to find ways to protect from the development of preschool wheeze and from its consequences. So my message to you on World Children's Day is that children are the world's future, and many adult health conditions originate in childhood. Therefore, to ensure the well-being and health of future generations, I think it is essential to invest in the healthcare and health research for children worldwide.